What if we could create a world with almost no disease, corruption, violence, or environmental destruction? And what if we could do this in just a few months? As impossibly optimistic as this may sound, what I'm about to tell you has been proven by some of the most impressive research in the entire history of social sciences. My name is Joachim Klaas, and I wrote a book on how exactly it all works. I decided to give this book away for free, and in this video I'll explain you how this can change everything. Have you ever experienced one of those weird connections between a thought in your mind and an event in the world around you? You think about someone you haven't spoken in years, and suddenly he or she calls you. Or you have a strong feeling you should do something, even if you can't explain why, but events later show you it was a perfect decision. If you've had such an experience, you're not alone. Several surveys have shown that 2/3 of the population have had psychic experiences, where thoughts in their minds were so clearly connected to events in the world around them that it could not have been a coincidence. So could it be that we are all somehow connected to each other? This idea is actually as old as humanity itself. The ancient texts already described 5,000 years ago that our minds are much larger than our bodies. They are like different waves of the same ocean, an invisible field of a higher consciousness that connects us all. But how could this work? We think of our bodies as computers. The hardware, the brain, creates the software, our mind. This analogy actually sounds perfectly logical. When we put the hardware in sleep mode, the software stops working. When the hardware is damaged, it has clear effects on the quality of the software. And when the hardware is broken, it's game over. But what if our bodies would be more like radios? Well, then it all works as well. Turn the radio off and the music stops. Mess around with the hardware of the radio and the quality of the music will be affected. And if the radio is broken, the music will stop. No, not really. The local expression stops, but the music itself just continues. The music is connected to the radio, but it's not coming from the radio. It's a vibration and an invisible, omnipresent field that connects everything to everything else. A radio signal can be broadcasted at one point and be received at any other point around it simultaneously because there's that invisible field that connects every point to every single other point. And the cool thing about fields is that they can vibrate in many different ways all at the same time. So what if our brains work in the same way? What if we are not computers, but radios, tuned into one particular frequency so we can hear our own individual music, our thoughts? But the source of our thoughts is one universal field of life, intelligence, and consciousness that connects all of us. What if we really are all just different waves on the same ocean? Well, if this is so, then why can't we experience this connection to each other? Because we can only consciously experience the top part of the wave. The rest is hidden in what we call our subconscious minds. Carl Jung called the part where the wave meets the ocean the collective unconscious, the part of our subconscious minds that we all share. Sometimes, however, we do have an experience of a connection that slips through our subconscious mind, like the psychic experiences we discussed earlier. What if these are not coincidences, but momentary glimpses of our true interconnectedness? But there's another way to experience our connection with each other, something we experience every day. We call this experience love. What do we feel when we love somebody? We feel connected to them, right? Even though that connection is usually hidden in our subconsciousness, sometimes with some people it is so strong that we experience it anyway. Throughout time we have spoken about higher divine beings, and we have made claims about these beings like God is love. But what if this higher being is not some isolated being like an old man with a beard sitting on a cloud somewhere, but an invincible universal force of love that connects everything? What if we, from all races, all religions, and all culture, are just a part of the same universal force? We just give different names to it, like we give different names to the force of gravity. And what if all we have to do is experience this force of love in our own minds? In ancient times, people knew how to do this. They had techniques to directly experience this unity by making their minds completely quiet, but while staying fully conscious and alert. They had a conscious experience of the ocean. This was called transcending. The more they alternated that silence with regular daily activity, the more they trained their minds to experience that connection permanently, 24/7. This technique was called meditation. But over time, the technique to transcend got lost when people started misinterpreting meditation as a technique where you had to do something, sitting in a rather uncomfortable positions while doing some form of concentration on a sound or monitoring your thoughts or any other form. These techniques can all create some relaxation, but they will actually prevent the mind from reaching that state of complete silence. As long as you're doing something, the wave is still active. It will remain in its individual active waveform and cannot merge with the silent ocean. There was one tradition, however, where the technique to transcend had been preserved in its purity. This tradition was completely secluded from mankind in Himalayan mountains until the technique was brought back to the world about 50 years ago. Very likely you've already heard about this technique. It's called Transcendental Meditation, or TM. And equally likely you have no idea what TM really is. TM is not a technique to meditate, but a technique to transcend, and the only way to do this is just point the mind in the right direction and doing very little. Correct meditation happens by itself, completely effortlessly, because the mind wants to transcend. All we have to do is give it a chance. Fortunately, not doing anything is actually easy. Millions of people have already found that TM is so easy to do that anyone can learn to transcend, and will have the experience from the very first few sittings. And the effects are spectacular, and they can be measured. Researchers have found that during transcending, the body experiences a far deeper state of rest than during relaxation, even far deeper than during sleep. Stress hormones, which suppress our immune system, decrease, and happiness hormones increase. This has a strong effect on our immune system, as measured in several increased white blood cells with TM practitioners. On top, researchers also found that transcending has spectacular effects on our brain development. It livens dormant potentials of our brain, and the whole brain starts working as one unified whole. And all this creates significant long-term benefits on almost all areas of life. Transcendental meditation is now the most thoroughly researched, and according to all the research, also by far the most successful mental technique in the world. Over 350 published studies show significant benefits in just about any area of life that can be researched, including up to 70% lower hospitalizations from any disease, reduced stress, depression, insomnia, PTSD, addictions, high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, ADHD, but also on self-confidence, relationships, IQ, creativity, emotional stability, memory, and many more. Dozens of comparative studies have also found that transcending is 2 to 3 times as effective as any other form of meditation or relaxation, and usually more effective than conventional treatments as well. For example, a recent $2.5 million Pentagon study published in one of the world's most prestigious journals found TM to be one of the most effective treatments against PTSD they ever researched. If people would become healthier, happier, and smarter, do you think this could change the world? Well, we're just getting started. The real difference between transcending and relaxation, and the most spectacular effect of TM, is what we will call the TM field effect. This is what this video is all about. If we dive into the ocean, we create a splash. We enliven the water, or in our case, enliven the qualities of unity in our own consciousness. But if we dive, we don't just create a splash, but also waves that spread around us. This means that this quality of unity will also be enlivened in the people around us. They will start to feel more connected to each other. This will change their thinking and their behavior. Yesterday, they didn't see anything wrong with hurting their neighbor in order to get something for themselves. Today, it just doesn't feel right anymore. They don't know why they changed their minds, they just did. In the 1960s, Maharishi, the founder of the TM technique, predicted that this field effect would be so strong that if only 1% of the population learned TM, there would be a measurable change for the whole population. To light up a whole town, we don't need light everywhere. Just a few street lamps here and there is enough. As controversial as that may have sounded, the 1% field effect was just a start. In the late 1970s, Maharishi started teaching a far more powerful advanced TM technique called the TM sidhi program, that allowed people to transcend much longer and even remain there while their bodies became active, making little hops. It was found that when people practiced these advanced techniques together in one big group, the field effect was far stronger still. If 3 people jump into a lake separately, they will each create a wave. Like this, only 1% of the population jumping into the lake once in a while is sufficient to stir the whole lake. But if they would hold hands and jump together, they will create one big wave that is 3 times as big and will travel 3 times further. And if the radius increases, the affected area will increase by the square of the radius, or 9 times larger. This means that instead of 1% of the population practicing TM in their own homes, only the square root of 1% would be needed to create the same effect if people were practicing these advanced techniques in big groups. And this is not a big number. For an area with 10 million population, 1% is 100,000, and the square root of 1% is only 321. About 300 people meditating together in one big group could create a positive effect in the way 10 million people think and behave. The claims just got a whole lot more outrageous, but the research got a whole lot more impressive as well. Now, the researchers just had to take an area where violence was high, or where even a war was going on, and where the trends predicted a worsening situation, so nobody in their right mind would predict things to improve. Then they do predict an improvement in advance with the exact starting and exact ending date, and predict that after the experiment things will go back to the old trends again. Then they bring in a group of advanced TM meditators to the area on the start date and remove them on the end date and check if the changes took place as predicted. These experiments have been done not just once or twice, but over 50 times. Every single time the results happened as predicted, and usually the effect was so big that records were broken, like a record decrease in crime rate or a complete cessation of warfare or record stock market increases. Here's a particularly interesting research in Jerusalem during the Lebanon War in the 1980s, where the size of a group of advanced TM meditators fluctuated daily over 2 months, between 80 to 250. They next calculated a daily quality of life index, which included things like crime in Israel, the stock market performance, and war casualties in Lebanon, and found that it followed these fluctuations closely. When the group got bigger, everything improved at the same time. When the group was big enough to theoretically influence the war in Lebanon, war casualties suddenly went down by 95%. The chance that something like this could happen by coincidence, or probability as it's called in science, is very small. And when these experiments have been repeated 50 times with exact predictions in advance, the probability is close to 0. In fact, the chance of winning the Powerball lottery this week is about 200 billion times higher than the chance that the TM field effects could have been a coincidence. This is why more than 20 of these researches have been published in some rather prestigious journals in sociology. The method may be unorthodox, but the data was indisputable. Combined, these studies are now the most consistently successful studies in the entire history of social sciences. Simply no other study ever showed such a strong effect with such a high consistency and such a low chance that it could be a coincidence. So what if this is really all true? Can you start to imagine what this could do for a world? If we want to remove all negative thoughts and behavior for 100 million people, the square root of 1% is only 1,000 advanced meditators that we have to get together in a group. For a population of 1 billion, it's only 3,000, and for the entire world population, it's only 9,000. Now look at this, over 250,000 people have already been trained in these advanced TM techniques. All we have to do is bring a few thousand of these together and hire them as professional peacemakers. This will cost some money. For example, to employ 2,000 professional peacemakers to create the effect for the entire US population would cost about $3 million per month. But that's nothing compared to what our governments are spending now. The US expenses for just healthcare, defense, and crime prevention alone are more than $300 billion per month. If they could save only 1% of this, they paid back their investment 1,000 times every single month, which results in an annual ROI of 120,000%. And the data shows that the savings would be far higher than 1%, at least 10 times higher. If there is a program that could really eradicate almost all disease, all corruption, violence, and environmental destruction, which has a higher statistical certainty that it works than anything else ever tried before, which is more effective than anything else, and at such a low cost that it would save governments billions, if not trillions, do you think that our government should use this program? So then why nobody's using it? Well, it has been used already. More than $150 million has already been spent on this program, mostly from donations and from Maharshi's organization-owned money. And at least one government has already used it to create the biggest positive change in their country's history. But given how powerful it is, this is still very little. The reason why it's been mostly ignored is because unless you understand the new perspective where we are all connected, and that transcending is a way to enliven that connection, the idea that a small group of a few hundred people transcending together can influence how millions of people think and behave just sounds like the craziest and most bizarre thing you've ever heard. This is why I spent 15 years to write a book that explains everything in such an easy way that anybody can understand it, and why I decided to give the book away for free. Now all you have to do is download it, take the time to read it, and tell everybody you know to do the same. The future of our world may depend on it.